Awesome. So today we got some really cool things. We're going to just do a revamp of the weekend and just kind of go through some things. I really wanted to talk a little bit more today on the Ragland's test and the adrenals, some things that we didn't cover at the training, and then also looking at just some of Einstein's theories. This is just a prelude to session 4. So for those of you who are looking at your calendars now, you have plenty of time. You have all the way until December to get set up for session 4. And this is going to be a phenomenal session because this is the Tao of the healthcare entrepreneur. And this is where you really get the replenishing that you need and the rejuvenation. This is where we do planning for the year. So now you're in high productivity mode in your practice. So literally the harvest time. Once summer's over, then you go into harvest time, and now summer's just coming to an end. So everybody should be ramping up their marketing efforts, ramping up production, removing bottlenecks in your system, creating new policy based on new changes. And but in doing that, one of the things you want to recognize with your patients and also with yourself is this genius of correcting the adrenal function, because we have this thing, the reticular activation system in our brain that connects with the amygdala, and that is our fight or flight response. And so if you don't fix that fight or flight response, or at least start managing it, there's no way you can correct the mitochondria. Because Dan, what's going on with mitochondria when the adrenals are in fight or flight?
That's one of those things that triggers that cellular danger response. It's they start creating a bunch of oxidative stress with reactive oxygen species. They lose their efficiency, a lot more free radical damage, increase aging, increase in genetic damage, decrease in total energy output. So it's a bad situation for energy and inflammation.
Yeah, because that cellular defense reaction or response is, I mean, it's like what we learned over the weekend. And Dan, thank you for all your research on this. But we learned that there's something that gets triggered before your immune system even gets triggered, and before your nervous system is even triggered, and that's this cellular defense response. Or do we call it reaction, the CDR?
It's a cell danger response.
Cell danger response. And so that what that means is that our bodies, the mitochondria, have evolved, from single cell organisms, these bacterial species, and now they've migrated up into our cellular structures, and there's thousands of them in healthy cells. And actually the mitochondria can multiply, and you can have more mitochondria in your cells, or they can go into mitophagy and you'll start getting rid of the inefficient mitochondria. And mitochondria change shapes, they change sizes, they can become very full and kind of tight, or they can be kind of smushy and spindly. I mean, it's so fascinating, but one of the things the mitochondria are there to do is remind us when we're stressed. And so the adrenals, you've got this axis called the HPA axis. And years ago, I started realizing that if I could get this HP axis to calm down, I could make so much more progress with my patients. Because you think about a digestive protocol. How many of you have ever had a poor night's sleep, or you've been up thinking about issues at night? And what happens to your digestive system when you've had those nights?
It's messed up. It either doesn't move, it stops the daily repair that it's supposed to have, right?
Right. Yeah.
Nasty.
Does not feel good.
Doesn't feel good. Yeah. You're either super hungry because of the ghrelin, or you don't have much of an appetite, or you feel bloated. I mean, so even your patients who have these digestive issues, like this HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, it's such a critical component. And some of the things that it does is it releases these cortico-releasing hormones, which are the CRH, and that can inhibit thyroid function. So it inhibits your thyroid stimulating hormone, thyroid releasing hormone, and it also can inhibit the conversion of T4 to T3. So this is pretty interesting because now we have a body that's in fight or flight, and the thyroid hormone is one of your longevity hormones. But if you want to fix the thyroid, you got to go upstream a little bit and say, well, how's the brain functioning? And so what we've learned is that this chronic high cortisol puts your body in the stress response, and then you don't have the thyroid function that you'd like. And so this can also impact your reproductive hormones because the cortico-releasing hormone also inhibits gonadotropin. And I don't know how many of you are using the gonadorelin peptides. Have you used that, Dan, yet with your testosterone therapies?
No, just that CJC, the ipamorelin, and the IGF blend, and now the 5-amino. Never done the gonadorelin.
So gonadorelin is, you know how we'd use like an HCG as an aromatase inhibitor, and it keeps the hypothalamus, attuned to the testosterone production, so we don't go into atrophy and gonadal shrinking on testosterone. Well, gonadorelin is another way of going up the pathway one more cycle. And you can use gonadorelin with your patients on testosterone. And according to Justin at Wells, that is one of the best ways that you can actually have great, healthy testosterone response in the body when you're on the testosterone therapy.
Sweet. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I haven't dug into that. Just a real quick side note, when you're talking about ghrelin earlier, when Justin was talking about the MK677, the butyrate, I actually took that. It was the very first peptide I ever took. And I was insatiably hungry, and it kind of messed up my sleep. But I was ravagingly hungry constantly.
Well, and that's one of the cool things about peptides is you can start working on these pathways. And one of the peptides that we use to reset this HPA axis is epitalin. And epitalin is a telomerase activator. So it's a telomerase enzyme. It works right on the pineal gland, so it can help reset your cortisol and melatonin cycles. And so if you guys have patients who, one of the things I'll do in a phase 1 process, and especially, after this weekend, I'm like, man, we got to start working on the mitochondria even more. But one of the things you can do with your patients who have autoimmunity, if they have thyroid issues, if they have any kind of PTSD, if they're not sleeping well, if they can't lose weight, phase 1 and phase 2, you always want to include epitalin in there because it does reset this HPA axis. And it's what I found with this peptide is it feels really stabilizing. So how when your adrenal, your fight or flight response is really elevated, and you just feel like there's impending doom all around. What the epitalin does is it helps just turn off that signal so that your body can actually start to relax. And once you do that, Dan, it'd be interesting to look at the mitochondria, how the mitochondria respond to that, turning down the volume of the stress response from the brain or the amygdala.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting to really see that.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's keep covering this. So what happens when you have this HPA axis dysregulation? So if it's stopping the gonadorelin, if it's a gonadorelin releasing inhibitor, so that tells your body not to produce sex hormones. So one of the reasons you want to use the gonadorelin peptide, or gonadotropin is actually the releasing peptide in the brain, but the peptide's called gonadorelin. But one of the things that happens when the body's in high stress, and you can use gonadorelin whether somebody's in a stress mode or whether they're on hormone replacement therapy or not. But even if someone's on progesterone, estradiol, even thyroid hormone, testosterone, any of these hormone replacement therapies, gonadorelin keeps that circuitry alive from the hypothalamus to the pituitary so that you don't have this endocrine atrophy. And so what we've learned is that when you have these environmental stressors, then it starts to impact estrogens in the body. And estrogens, if you think of the estrogens, like your E1 is your primary circulating hormone, or estrogen in menopausal women. not known as like the most robust estrogen. E2, the estradiol, that's like the, I mean, that's it. That's kind of like T3, T4 versus T3 with the thyroid hormone. This E2 is what really is, it's activating all those hormonal responses. And then E3, this is, I think it's estratriol, triol. Dan, what's E3 again? It's
Yeah,
it's got the tri in it. It's a 3-prong.
yeah, it's estrone, estradiol, and then estriol.
Estriol.
I have to say it out loud.
Estriol, yes.
Yeah.
And that happens when you're pregnant. So I don't know if you guys have done pregnancy tests lately, but you may want to. Just saying. All right. Well, all right. I don't even know if you should do
Yeah.
Everyone's like, what do you mean?
It would be confusing for some people if it did pop positive. Yeah, don't do it unless it's necessary. Kind of a existential crisis. So
yeah, but one of the interesting things is when women have a very challenging time in your patients in menopause, you realize that typically they have cortisol levels that aren't balanced. They have either high cortisol or low cortisol, and then that starts to suppress the reproductive system, and then the adrenal glands have the inability to make up the loss in the estradiol. So that's when your female patients, they start to feel like they have memory loss, brain fog, their skin and vaginal dryness. They don't sleep well. And so these things are really critical, but before you just move right into, let's get the estrogen treated, make sure you go upstream one layer deeper and say, well, let's treat the HPA axis. And there's two primary ways, and that's with epitalin and it's with the gonadorelin. And gonadorelin is a lyophilized agent, so it can create some confusion for your patients, just like MOTS does. So just so everyone's aware. Dan, what did I miss on that? Any comments on the estrogens or what you see in stress, maybe with infertility?
no, I think that's it's dead on, especially with how disruptive these things can become. Right?
Yeah, it can be pretty darn damaging. And so if we look at this, one of the precursors, the upstream hormones, pregnenolone, DHEA, and some people, there's some controversy around, is there really a cortisol steal? Does it happen? And actually, if you look at a diagram of the very first hormone that's secreted and made by the liver, and then everything trickles down from there, it's cholesterol. And so cholesterol has two pathways, and one is where the hormone gets converted into pregnenolone, and then you've got DHEA, and I can't remember all the sequences, but somewhere downstream is estrogens and progesterone and testosterone. Whereas on the other side from cholesterol, you've got cortisol that gets made. So some of your patients don't have a proper stress response when they're on statins. But I think one of the things I got out of the weekend is that if you wanted a statin medication, Dr. Andrews is a big fan of those. Okay, maybe not. He's not a fan of them. He thinks there's other ways of addressing it than getting people on statins, because we talked about the fact that statins really disrupt the mitochondria in the body. And just the danger of that, or even having low cholesterol, you see patients just their body does not work. I have a patient, and her cholesterol, she came in, it was in the 90s, her total cholesterol. And I mean, she was just weak, her muscles cramped all the time, her brain wasn't working. And it was much more difficult to get her out of that state, like that catatonic state, than it was from someone to bring somebody down and detox them and get their body balanced who have high cholesterol. So yes, a lot of interesting things go on in this pathway. Here's a study on chronic fatigue. What they found is that there is evidence that supports the presence of an HPA axis dysfunction in patients with chronic fatigue. Hey everybody, Reagan Archibald here with Go Wellness. And if you liked this episode, if it actually helped inspire you to be a better practitioner, help more people, establish a much better foundation for your business, then I'm going to ask a favor of you. And that favor is for you to share this with somebody you care about and love in the healthcare field. I don't mind if it's an acupuncturist, a functional medicine practitioner of any sorts, a naturopathic doctor, a medical doctor, any type of endocrinologist or specialist. We need to get this community strong, and we can't do it without your help. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the hard work you're putting in and day out. I know it can be a grind, especially with some of the chronic cases that you're treating, but this show will help transform the way that you think, help transform the way you practice, and change the lives of thousands. Thank you for being part of our community.